What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode. Today, we're talking about the Black Lives Matter movement. Did you know that Black Lives Matter, the movement, is not just one organization? That's right. Most people think that the Black Lives Matter movement is just led by the Black Lives Matter Global Network. That is the group that's organized and co-founded by Patrisse Cullors. She's the one who that viral video of the co-founder saying, "I'm a trained Marxist." That was Patrisse Cullors. So it was founded with that individual, two others. Most people think that that organization is solely responsible for this movement, and that is not the case. In fact, there is a whole coalition involved in this movement, of which 150 different individual entities, whether they're nonprofits or actual businesses, they are responsible for doing different things in this movement. So today we're going to be talking about one of those organizations involved in the movement, and that is Movement for Black Lives. That's the actual name. This is essentially one of the political wings of the Black Lives Matter movement. So what they do is essentially draft legislation and try to pass bills. This is the Breathe Act that Ilhan Omar has been a proponent of. So we're going to go through, we're going to talk about Movement for Black Lives, who they are, what exactly they do, and take a look at some of the goals, including quotes from their website, which are pretty interesting to read. So let's get into it. The Black Lives Matter Global Network includes groups. Now, I'm sorry. So the Black Lives Matter movement, I believe, I'm not confident 100% on this yet, but I believe that the movement is kind of just the umbrella term for all of the organizations that are currently kind of protesting, rioting under the same goals of Black liberation, right? So the coalition, specifically the word coalition and the Black Lives Matter coalition, that is 150 organizations. So the movement, specifically just the movement, just all the groups that are operating under this umbrella, is including groups like the Black Lives Matter Global Network, the Afro Liberation Front chapters, which seem to utilize and have very similar patterns to Antifa in Portland, also the Black Socialists of America, and many others. One of the more active organizations in this movement and the coalition, although they receive very, very minimal press coverage, is the Movement for Black Lives. So this is listed as a 501c3 nonprofit. However, they use a fiscal sponsor called the Alliance for Global Justice to receive that 501c3 status. So one of their current bills that's out right now is the Breathe Act. This is, I have seen it talked about by Ilhan Omar. I have seen Patrisse Cullors on a Now This segment. This is the website for it. It's breatheact.org. Patrisse Cullors did a segment for Now This where she was basically begging, I think it was LA City Council, she was begging some legislators and voters or whoever it was to basically pass the Breathe Act because people are dying in the streets, and right, we want to end the war on Black people is what this is about. So here's the Breathe Act. It says here that it's presented by the Electoral Justice Project of the Movement for Black Lives. It says it's a visionary bill that divests taxpayer dollars from brutal and discriminatory policing and invests in a new vision of public safety. Right, so let's take a look at the bill summary, shall we? Let's take a look here. And you guys can all follow this at thebreatheact.org if you want to take a look at it yourselves. Okay, so here is the summary. It says you can, let's see, go section by section. Basically divesting federal resources from incarceration, investing new approaches to community safety, utilizing funding incentives, allocating new money to build healthy, sustainable, and equitable communities for all people. holding officials accountable and enhancing self-determination of Black communities. I'm not really sure what this self-determination means. Let's see here. It says the bill would it said it would eliminate federal programs and agencies used to finance and expand the U.S. criminal legal system, including the Department of Defense 1033 program, the Edward Byrne Justice Assistance Grant Program, community-oriented policing systems, the Drug Enforcement Administration, so the DEA, ICE as well. ICE is included in here. We don't want Immigration and Customs, they say. Interesting. So it says it also would dramatically reduce the Department of Defense budget. That's interesting. Why is that? And it also says it would directly make changes to the federal criminal legal system, including changes to policing, prosecution, sentencing, and jailing practices that have disproportionately criminalized Black and brown communities, both capitalized, LGBTQIA people, Indigenous people, and disabled people. Specific changes include, but are not limited to, eliminating surveillance tactics that are disproportionately used to target brown, Black, and Muslim communities by prohibiting predictive policing, facial recognition technologies, drones, and similar tools. It says eliminating the use of ankle monitoring, including ankle monitors, smartphone applications, and other tools used to track location, ending civil asset forfeiture, abolishing mandatory minimum sentencing laws. I'm okay with that, but some of these other ones are kind of crazy. I think that's probably one of the more moderate listings on here. Ending life sentences, abolishing the 3 strikes law, developing a time-bound plan to close all federal prisons and immigration detention centers. That's what I mean by more radical. See, they do something. The issue with these lists, right, is you really have to read everything because they throw some very, very radical things in alongside things that many people would kind of shake their head and say, yeah, I'm kind of for that. Like, for example, I'm totally down with adjusting the 3 strikes rule, adjusting it, not removing it, but adjusting it to where if, you get 3 strikes for a drug offense or something like that, then you have to go to a rehabilitation facility instead of a jail kind of thing, right? But, instead of just keeping things moderate and making real sustainable changes, what they do is they throw these very radical left policies, such as eliminating all jails, eliminating all detention centers for immigration, right? Eliminating ankle monitoring, including ankle monitors. I don't know how else some certain violent criminals would be allowed out, right, without having an ankle monitor. I mean, in some cases, it's necessary. Anyway, going on, it says further repealing and replacing the 1994 Violent Crime Control and Law Enforcement Act with non-carceral, non-punitive investments in communities. And decriminalizing and retroactively expunging drug offenses. Okay, so that's just section 1. I don't think we're going to go through all 13 pages of this. I just kind of wanted to give you guys a look at what this was. So basically, this is definitely a very political organization. Obviously, as you can see, they have a list of political objectives that they want to accomplish just with this one bill initiative, right? So they have others. So this is a very active political group. They are working quite closely with Black Lives Matter, which is interesting to note. Anyway, let's move on. Here's a tweet from them, from their Twitter page. It says, on Friday, allies of the BLM movement will have an opportunity to hear directly from organizers of the Movement for Black Lives, a coalition of more than 150 Black-led organizations during its virtual Black National Convention. So here's something interesting that I haven't mentioned yet. They're actually throwing a Black National Convention to go alongside the DNC and the RNC. So in other words, these two platforms, right, DNC, RNC, these are typically political in nature. I mean, they exist for no other purpose than elections, right, to raise awareness for the policies and the candidates of the election. And now it appears that we are seeing Movement for Black Lives, a coalition of 150 Black-led organizations, throw a Black national convention when we know that these are political groups, they're organizing political initiatives, and one of, as we'll see later on, one of their goals is to gain political power and community control. Those are actually listed objectives on their website. So let's take a look at that. So I guess here we have another tweet, and it's time to build a Black United Front with the commie fist. Join the fist. So anyway, it says, meet us at the Black National Convention on Friday at 7 for a virtual experience like no other. So yeah, so here we have another, I guess, marketing post for the Black National Convention, which I guess is something political. Maybe I'll check it out and watch it and report back to you guys on what happens there. Anyway, so now we have a little section on a fiscally sponsored 501c3. So what is a 501c3? Basically, it's a nonprofit. It gives you tax benefits that go along with a nonprofit. What's interesting is this is a fiscally sponsored 501c3. A fiscal sponsor means that your organization actually doesn't obtain 501c3 status. Instead, you outsource your accounting and HR work and stuff like that to an organization that did get that status through the proper legal channels, right? So this is interesting because I have noticed that this is a common strategy used by many of these Black Lives Matter organizations, is that they use a 501c3 fiscal sponsor in order to obtain their nonprofit status, right? Okay, so keep that in mind. Here we have just a little bit about who their fiscal sponsor is. It's the Alliance for Global Justice, who is a very, very radical left, communist sympathizing nonprofit. They actually, according to their website, did the fiscal sponsoring for Occupy Wall Street. They also regularly hold virtual meetings with comrades that are members, I guess, of the Sandinista movement in Venezuela. Weird, right? So you can actually go to their website, like you can go through all these links, right, on their website, and you can actually find a sign-up form for doing these little, like, calls with, I guess, communist sympathizers over in Venezuela. So there's a link there. There's open communication there is kind of what I'm trying to point out. Also, Alliance for Global Justice is also known to lend aid to various left-wing initiatives. They're actually funded by charities that include layers, right? Various charities that if you go through the layers of the tax and ownership records, you find are actually owned by George Soros's Open Society Foundation, which is a name that continuously pops up when you look through the Black Lives Matter movement. You notice that Soros and organizations associated with him are regularly popping up. Now, I would like for anybody interested in this layers of charity, layers of charity organizations that donate to Black Lives Matter but happen to have ties with George Soros. If you guys are interested in that, I recommend going to a video or reading the article on our site about Shell 501c3s, open source politics, and George Soros, and it is talking about how open source politics is being used as a method to create seemingly leaderless movements that are funded by a variety of Shell charities that are really do-nothing charities. They don't really do very much good with the money that is coming in, and it's hard to track where the money is going. So it's, that's something that if you're interested in how this is being financed and organized, maybe go check out that video. Anyway, so Alliance for Global Justice has fiscally sponsored groups with radical left initiatives, such as initiatives like the elimination of Israel and sponsoring known violent leftist extremists. Influence Watch has a really good article on that if you're interested in more. So a political wing of the BLM movement. Let's take a look at some of the actionable goals on their website. I'm going to read some quotes from their website. So the first one that is listed as a kind of a goal on their site, an initiative item, is end the war on Black Americans. Movement for Black Lives wants to stop purported state-sanctioned violence, that's in quotes, against Black Americans by the police and criminal justice system. They also claim to be bringing justice to and uplifting Black, queer, trans, and gender nonconforming, as well as intersex and disabled people. So basically, these super disproportionately underrepresented groups, right? So here's a quote from their website on ending the war on Black Americans. And just for reference, in their quotes, Black is always capitalized. It says, Black life and dignity require Black political will and power. Despite constant exploitation and perpetual oppression, Black people have bravely and brilliantly been a driving force pushing towards collective liberation. In recent years, we have taken to the streets, launched massive campaigns, and impacted elections, but our elected leaders have failed to address the legitimate demands of our movement. We can no longer wait. So here they actually say that they feel that they have impacted elections and launched massive campaigns. And they say that they still feel that they have not gotten justice, and so they can no longer wait. Now, what does that exactly mean? They don't really explain further, but it does seem a little bit more on the aggressive side, in my opinion. Now, the next initiative is Invest, Divest. This agenda item is focused on decriminalizing Black Americans and reinvesting funds used on policing and jails into Black communities, education, and health. I'm all for investing more into historically underprivileged neighborhoods. I think that's what Opportunity Zones did a good job of. I don't know if they're doing a good job anymore, considering the outrageous riots and destruction, widespread destruction in certain areas like Chicago. But that said, I'm all for investing into the communities, but it's not just invest into the communities, it's divest from police and jails. Let's read a quote from their website. They say, we demand investments in education, health, and safety of Black people instead of investments in criminalizing, caging, and harming of Black people. We want investments in Black communities, determined by Black communities, and divestment from exploitative forces, including prisons, fossil fuels, police, surveillance, and exploitative corporations. Wow. See, that's a mouthful. See, it's not just abolish the police or defund the police. There is a whole underlying agenda that goes with this, and that is why I'm so strongly cautioning politicians and journalists to pay attention to what these groups are really saying. I know that they present great marketing. I totally get that. And that is one of the things that we really need to be asking ourselves is who is doing this marketing? Who is coming up with the graphic design? Who is doing all the copy and the publishing and the scheduling? Anybody who is a journalist or a marketer knows this takes a lot of time. How are they getting the funds to and the manpower to do such an intense, complex marketing scheme? And in addition to kind of organize all of these in-person events, right? I don't know. I think it's worth asking, okay? So that's, again, like I said, it is a whole underlying political movement. This is not just abolish the police. This is more than just abolish the police, okay? This is much more. Fossil fuels. What the hell? This is an interesting one. I'm not really sure. I mean, I understand that fracking poses an issue. I definitely understand that as somebody who spends a lot of time outdoors. I love camping. I love fishing. I totally am for protecting the environment and making a switch to more sustainable energy sources. That said, we can't just cut off fossil fuels because we know that that is not realistic. You don't just cut off one energy source and then say, well, now the demand is going to increase for the other energy source. We're just going to fill that demand immediately. That's not going to happen. We need to kind of wean off one and pursue the other. And I think Elon Musk is on a great track for that transition, but we need more. We need more of that sustainable energy available first to the modern everyday person before we can just make a switch off of fossil fuels. Okay, so also exploitative forces including prisons, police, surveillance, and exploitive corporations. Exploitive corporations, they don't go into a little bit further. I'm not sure exactly what they mean by that. So it's worth noting that that's kind of an unclear, off-the-wall request, right? So let's see. Next initiative is reparations. Reparations is something that's very heavily talked about in this movement. Black Lives Matter Chicago leader Ariel Atkins actually was caught on video saying that reparations that looting is basically like reparations. And I personally have seen marketing coming out from unknown sources. It's hard to say where the original image came from, but it's very concerning. Very high quality graphic design where a number of people are running into a store and running out of store looting, and at the bottom is the words reparations in action. And that actually, I saw that actually right around the time the George Floyd riots were just dying down. And I found it interesting because I couldn't really track who the source was. It was a very high quality image, and it was obviously pushing a very aggressive and violent agenda. So something to note there. Anyway, reparations. Movement for Black Lives demands reparations for past and continuing harms against Black Americans. They demand improved education for Black people, a minimum livable wage for Black people, as well as financial reparations, which I'm assuming means like some sort of lump sum monthly or one time. A quote from their website: "We demand reparations for past and continuing harms. The government, responsible corporations, and other institutions that have profited off of the harm they inflicted on Black people, from colonialism to slavery, through food and housing redlining, mass incarceration, and surveillance, must repair the harm done." Okay. Next point is economic justice through collectivized property ownership. This is huge. If you weren't paying attention before, you want to pay attention here. This means they want collectivized property ownership as economic justice, basically another form of reparations. However, they want to call this economic justice because they already listed reparations. So, economic justice, according to the Movement for Black Lives, includes redistribution of wealth, restructuring tax codes, restored land, in quotes, ending privatization of natural resources, breaking up large banks, and more. You guys, I didn't include a quote for that one, but if you would like a quote, you can go to thenomanzone.com or m4bl.com. I think it is .com. And you can m4bl.org, and you can find that page there. Okay. Next one is community control. The movement demands community control, which means control of state, local, and federal law enforcement agencies. This includes ending privatization of education. That means no more private schools. Everything becomes a public school. Ending privatization of education. Does that mean homeschool as well? I'm not sure. They don't elaborate there. Let's read a quote. "We demand a world where those most impacted in our communities control the laws, institutions, and policies that are meant to serve us, from our schools to our local budgets, economies, police departments, and our land, while recognizing that the rights and histories of our indigenous family must also be respected." Okay, this is where things start getting radical. You start listing community control as a demand, as a political organization, something that identifies itself as a political advocacy group, right? They're throwing a BNC, a Black National Convention. That's quite political, in my opinion. I think anybody reasonable would agree there. So let's read the next one and the last. I believe this is the last point. They say, this one is political power. The movement demands independent Black political power, end of criminalization of Black political advocacy, and release of all political prisoners. Now, what is a political prisoner? Well, they call political prisoners people who are rioting and looting. They call those political prisoners. So, do the people who attacked Kenosha, do they count as political prisoners? Because they are pushing a political cause, right? Sorry, I'm starting to lose my voice, but I'm going to keep going. We're almost done. Okay, so political power. Let's read a quote. from their site. It says, "We demand independent Black political power and Black self-determination in all areas of society. We envision remaking of the current U.S. political system in order to create a real democracy where Black people and all marginalized people can effectively exercise full political power." Wow, that's probably the strongest quote that we've read yet, and I think it's very self-explanatory. I don't think that they're really hiding anything there. So, is this an organization that we should be concerned about, watching, maybe monitoring? Probably something that we should consider monitoring, especially considering that they want to remake the current U.S. political system. You know? I mean, let's read a last tweet, right? And this is another plug for their national convention. You know, it says, "Black National Convention 2020, a primetime event celebrating Black culture." They are creating their own political party. This is what's happening, and we need to pay attention. Okay, so I think I'll finish with that. I'm going to go get some water. Thank you guys for watching. I will be doing another video and loading it very shortly. This one is particularly about Jeffrey Epstein. All right, thank you guys. Have a good one. Goodbye.